Cryptids are some of the most fascinating unknowns in our world, and it feels like new ones pop up every day. But interestingly enough, more than a fair few have been found to actually exist over the years. Today, we dive into the stories of 10 of these animals' origins and eventual discoveries. I think there's a couple of compelling surprises on the list. Get some Pringles and give them to me because I'm hungry. Here's 10 cryptids that actually exist. Oarfish. Medieval maps were quite commonly adorned with fantastical sea monsters ranging from anglerfish whale combos to weird pig whale demons, but perhaps seen most commonly was the sea serpent, a long, twisting body usually depicted wrapping itself around unsuspecting passing ships. It may be easy to pass this off as just another made-up map monster, but what if I told you something swims in the deep that may have been the real-life inspiration for the sea serpent? Here's the oarfish. Growing from 10 to 36 feet long, it's pretty easy to see how they can be considered a horrifying monster. After centuries of tales and illustrations of the mythical sea snake, the creature was first identified by Norwegian-Danish zoologist Peter Asanius in 1772. He called it Regalicus glesni, I think, with the first part meaning belonging to a king, and the second named after the location it was found in. He should have called it Hugicus sea snakeus, meaning big-ass water snake. It lives in the depths of 650 to over 3,000 feet down, hence why it's so rare to find one. In fact, most of the time, the only way to see one is when they wash up on shore after a storm, or come closer to the surface when injured or dying. This may explain how ancient peoples knew about their existence. It took all the way until 2001 for a live one to be spotted and recorded by the US Navy. Though, like I said, it is a little more common for them to be found washed up on shore after dying. Who knows, maybe you'll see an oarfish one day. They live in most of the world's oceans, just usually sticking to a more central latitude. Honestly, this definitely qualifies as a sea serpent to me. Sure, they don't have teeth or take down ships, but they certainly look the part. It doesn't help that some cultures also see them as a bad omen, so do with that what you will. Alaskan alien spores. Now, you've probably heard of an Alaskan bullworm, but have you heard of the Alaskan alien spores? Well, on August 3rd, 2011, residents of the Eskimo village of Kivalina awoke to a strange orange goo covering the water surrounding their shores. The village is settled on the tip of an 8-mile-long barrier reef, and the community relies heavily on supporting themselves off the land. The orange goo was even found inside buckets set out to collect rainwater. Naturally, at first they were confused and worried, and even the federal government was at a loss for what the strange substance could be. Apparently, in freshwater streams, it was gooey and smelled foul. But scooped out of the ocean, there was no odor, and it felt more like baby oil. At first, a NOAA scientist in Juneau, Dr. Stanley Rice, said, "It was easy to see cellular structure surrounding the liquid droplet, and to identify this as animal. We have determined there are small invertebrate eggs, although we cannot tell which species." But after a few weeks of uncertain speculation, ranging from thousands of tiny fish eggs to algae blooms, NOAA released a new statement claiming the substance was fungal spores, consistent with spruce needle rust. They say that the fungus could have dried and traveled by air before landing in the water and becoming more goop-like. Village administrator Janet Mitchell said in an interview with NBC, "The fact that they have not completely ID'd this thing still leaves more questions in my mind. I'm not comfortable with this thing." And I have to agree with her. I've seen needle rust before, and I really can't imagine how that could turn into something that looks like this. This story brings to mind similar cases of star jelly, and you have to wonder if this strange life form is more than they say it is. But by all accounts, the case is closed, and the Alaskan alien spores are actually just rust fungus. Or are they? It's a little fishy that NOAA claimed they were eggs with cellular structure, then backpedaled to a simple fungal spore, don't you think? Okapi. Okay, Let's take a look at something more tame with a little less government conspiracy. The Okapi. At first glance, you probably think it looks like a zebra and maybe a horse had a baby. That was my first thought, but it's actually not related to zebras at all. In reality, it's a member of the giraffe family, often called the forest giraffe. It has ears and a tongue similar to that of a giraffe, and those ears are why it was considered a cryptid for so long. With incredibly precise and sensitive hearing, the Okapi would take off as soon as it heard any human activity in its vicinity. The Okapi can be found in densely covered rainforests in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. In 1890, Henry M. Stanley made note of a forest donkey that the local tribe of Wambuti people called Ati. To the local people, this was a common animal, and after years of reports, English explorer Sir Harry Johnston made the discovery in 1901, bringing back skins and pelts, proving their existence to the Western world. Nowadays, the Okapi is represented as the national animal of the DRC and can even be found on their currency. You may have the chance to see one in real life too, as they are present in several zoos worldwide. It must have been thrilling to blaze through the dense jungle, searching for a mythical creature, but we're super lucky that we're able to see them pretty easily in the modern day. Mike the Headless Chicken. In September 1945, in Colorado, a family of farmers called the Olsons were busy getting products ready to head to market. They planned on selling eggs and milk, chicken meat, the usual. They had some 40 to 50 chickens they were preparing by plucking the feathers and cutting off the heads. I'm sure most have heard the phrase running around like a chicken with its head cut off, or are just aware that sometimes chickens will move around for a while after being beheaded. But at the end of their day, Mr. Olson saw that one chicken was still moving quite a bit. He left for the night, and on returning the next morning, he saw that it was still alive. He thought it would be interesting to see how long he could keep this headless chicken alive, and so he did just that, giving him grain and water through an eyedropper. Mike continued to thrive. Word spread quickly around town, and just as fast, skepticism followed, with many believing the whole thing to be a hoax. That was until the Olsons brought Mike to the University of Utah, Salt Lake City, where scientists had a look at him. Turns out, although Mike didn't have his head, the way it was lopped off left enough brain stem for Mike to continue doing basic motor functions. Part of one ear was also left. I didn't know chicken ears were on their necks. And luckily for Mike, his jugular clotted in such a way that he didn't bleed to death. Soon after all of this, Life magazine came and gave Mike a photo shoot and international fame, and the Olsons would travel the southwestern US showing him off at sideshows. Apparently he was something of a cash cow, or chicken, for the family. Mike had a glorious run for 18 months until he unfortunately choked to death on mucus. Yummy! Anybody want some wings? Okay, that one was a little silly, but you see Mike the Headless Chicken and you just have to talk about it. Montauk Monster. Here's one that might be familiar, the Montauk Monster. I remember seeing pictures of this thing on every website popping up as those fake shock articles. I didn't know it was actually something other than just a photoshopped image. So, on July 13th, 2008, this thing washed up on the shore of Montauk, Long Island, New York. People were hurling theories left and right. A dog, a hoax, a stunt for a Snapple marketing campaign. Some people even claimed it was an experiment from the nearby Plum Island. That might make sense because Plum Island is where the Plum Island Animal Disease Center has lived since its establishment in 1954. But it seems the carcass has a much simpler explanation. A raccoon that lost its fur and became bloated due to floating in the water and began decomposing its softer flesh, hence why the snout looks bony. This would explain why the creature has hands with little fingers. This artist's rendition from Animachina.com shows how well the features of the animal line up with that of a raccoon. Interesting how such a media frenzy can arise from perhaps something so simple. But what do you think? Raccoon? Hoax? Experiment? Or something else? Mountain gorilla. For centuries, there were horror stories told in East Africa of large, haired creatures that would snatch people and eat them or crush them with their enormous strength. In 1625, English explorer Andrew Battelle wrote an account about these horrifying animals, in which he named them the Pongo. This Pongo is in all proportion like a man, but he's more like a giant in stature than a man, for he's very tall and has a man's face, hollow-eyed with long hair upon his brows. His face and ears are without hair, and his hands also. His body is full of hair, but not very thick, and it is a dunnish color. He goes always upon his legs, and carries his hands clasped on the nape of his neck, and when he goes upon the ground, they go many together, and kill many people that travel in the woods. Those Pongos are never taken alive, because they're so strong that 10 men cannot hold one of them. Any guesses? That's right, he's talking about gorillas. Later in the 1850s, a French-American traveler named Paul du Chaillu witnessed several gorillas and even brought some deceased examples back to Europe. Prior to this, stories and accounts of gorillas, or ape men, were disregarded and not taken seriously. Further, in 1902, a German captain named Robert von Beringe was on expedition in Rwanda to visit German outposts and strengthen their presence there. While climbing a series of volcanic mountains, Beringe and his group came upon a herd of what he described as big black monkeys before shooting 2 of them. The following is his account. We succeeded in killing 2 of these animals, and with a rumbling noise, they tumbled into a ravine, which had its opening in a northeasterly direction. After 5 hours of strenuous work, we succeeded in retrieving one of these animals using a rope. It was a big, human-like male monkey of 1.5 meters in height and a weight of more than 200 pounds. His chest had no hair, and his hand and feet were of enormous size. Unfortunately, I was unable to determine its type. Because of its size, it could not very well be a chimpanzee or a gorilla, and in any case, the presence of gorillas had not been established in the area around the lakes. Taking the body with them, the group was able to save the specimen, except for a hand that was taken by hyenas. The gorilla was brought back to Berlin, where it was determined that this was a new species of gorilla, the mountain gorilla. It was named Gorilla Beringi in honor of Captain Beringe. Kind of crazy to think gorillas weren't known to the world outside of Africa until the 1860s, and the even more rare and currently endangered species of mountain gorilla until the 1900s. Before that, they were thought of as giants or monsters to the people that witnessed them. Kellis Cat. This is my favorite animal from the list. The Kellis Cat. Found all over the Scottish Highlands, this dog-sized feral cat comes with a unique background. Celtic and Gaelic folklore tell of a strange fairy called the Ketchi, a cat with a large form and black fur and a white spot on his chest. It's said that the cat walks on 2 legs, but only when human eyes aren't watching. Then it stalks around with an arched back and raised fur. Some versions of the Ketchi claim it's a witch rather than a fairy that can change form into a cat 9 times before stuck like that forever. Regardless, this cat is no good. It looks to steal the souls of the recently deceased, able to snatch them before burial. Because of this, people of the Scottish Highlands would create distractions for the cats, such as music or catnip. They would enlist watchers night and day to keep the evil kitties at bay. Scots would also insist no fire be lit near the corpse, as the Ketchi would be enticed by its warmth. There's a bit more to the legend, but let's bring it back to reality. In 1983, a pair of cats oddly matching the physical description of the Ketchi were seen by the River Lassie. One was shot and taxidermied. Over the subsequent years, reports of these same cats were made with the animals being trapped or killed, having samples sent in to be studied. Stranger still, one of the taxidermies was lost, and a few of the samples were deemed unusable due to spoilage or contamination. The cats had received the name Kellas Cats after the village and estate they had been most commonly found on. At this point, many believed it was a hoax, and that these strange dog-sized cats didn't exist at all. It was thought that maybe people were mistaken and had only been coming across the more common Scottish wildcat, or even feral domestic cats. Well, turns out the skeptics weren't too far off. In 1986, a BBC film crew for the show Tomorrow's World set traps for the cats on the Kellis estate. A female was actually recorded and captured. Upon being sent for chromosome analysis, it was discovered that the cats were actually a hybrid breed of Scottish wildcats and domesticated cats. Pretty interesting that this real-life animal so closely resembles an important folkloric figure. It's thought that the Ketchi was inspired by the Scottish wildcat. Who knows, maybe these Kellis cats have existed for much longer than we've been aware, and they were the inspiration for these tales so long ago. I love Scotland and Scottish culture, and it's very close to my heart. In the future, I'll probably make a video covering more Scot folklore, so stay tuned. Giant squid. Returning to the sea for these next two entries, it's almost hard to believe there was a time when people didn't know about giant squids. You'd think they might be a little hard to miss, sometimes growing as large as 43 feet long and with eyes 1 foot in diameter. But at the same time, they do hang out between 1,650 and 3,300 feet down. One of the first reports of a giant squid actually comes from Aristotle himself. He called the creature Teuthus, differing from the smaller sized squids called Teuthis. He wrote in his work Historia Animalium, "Of the calamaries, the so-called Teuthus is much bigger than the Teuthis, for Teuthi, which is plural of Teuthus, have been found as much as 5 ells, which is 18.7 feet long." Later in Denmark around 1550, several squid were found floating in the ocean. Japetus Steenstrup wrote this report describing them as sea monks because they had a head like a man and a dress of scarlet like a monk's cloak. It's thought the Lusca from Caribbean folklore and the Scylla from Greek mythology were derived from the giant squid. Naturally, the giant squid is also thought to be a source of inspiration for the Scandinavian creature, the kraken.
No. Cropland's how it's pronounced in the original Scandinavian.
The first photograph of a giant squid was taken in 1874 by Reverend Moses Harvey of Newfoundland after he bought the dead cephalopod off a fisherman for $10. Harvey propped the thing up in his living room, draping it over his sponge bath, and snapped the photo over the course of 3 to 15 minutes. But it wasn't until 2002 that the first live, mature giant squid was caught on camera in Kyotengo, Japan. Then, later in 2004, the first photos of the species in its natural habitat were taken, also off the shores of Japan. The first video of one wasn't shot until 2006. I bet most of you were alive by then. The footage was taken again in Japan, off the coast of the Bonin Islands. Sorry for the quality, this video was uploaded in 2007. One last thing about the giant squid that I thought was cool, its brain is shaped like a donut, and its esophagus tube actually goes through the center hole. Imagine taking a big gulp and feeling it slide past your brain. Fun! Also, by the way, this guy has an older cousin, the colossal squid, who can reach lengths of 46 feet, but we'll save that for another time. Ziphius. In European and Scandinavian mythology, there was a creature called Ziphius. Described as a whale's body with the head of an owl, in medieval times, sailors believed this creature stalked the North Sea, ready to tear apart ships and eat its crew. In 1804, French zoologist Jean-Léopold Nicolas Frédéric Baron Cuvier discovered a skull on the coast of France. He later named it in his 1823 book, Research on Fossil Bones, as Ziphius caverostris, with the first part paying homage to what he thought could be the remains of the extinct mythical creature. The second part simply means concave, referring to its head. Later in 1850, paleontologist Paul Gervais discovered the bones matched perfectly with that of a beached whale carcass he had just seen. These days, the creature is known as Cuvier's beaked whale, or Ziphius. Astoundingly, Ziphius makes dives to nearly 10,000 feet and can remain below the surface for nearly 4 hours before needing air. For comparison, the greatest recorded dive of a blue whale is 1,033 feet and lasted only 15 minutes. These whales reach a length between 15 and 23 feet, and they can live for up to 60 years. So while they may not be the ship-destroying, man-eating monsters of legend, I think they definitely earn enough cool points in their own right. Griggstown Cow. For our last real-life cryptid today, we have the Griggstown Cow. Oh boy. In 1972, a cow got loose from a local farm in Griggstown, New Jersey. Over the next 30 years, reports of this cow would pop up here and there. It would be seen wandering the pastures and canal areas of the Millstone River floodplain. It developed a sort of Loch Ness Monster reputation because only stories and the occasional shaky photo were ever produced. Then, on November 23, 2002, the cow was actually found. A New Jersey Water Authority employee had discovered a lone bull lying in a ravine in Delaware and Raritan Canal State Park. It was old and worn looking, but soon a large group amassed to witness the Griggstown Cow in the flesh. They tied a rope around him and began to help pull him out of the muddy ravine he was stuck in. Once back up on his feet, he lowered his head and remained practically motionless for 48 hours. A doctor came to assess him, and after determining the pain he was in, causing him to be unable to move, they determined a euthanization was the best course of action. So, after 30 years of legend, the mighty Griggstown Cow was lethally injected right there in the park. He was buried close to the Griggstown Loch, and perhaps now his spirit will continue to roam the floodplain, capturing the hearts of Griggstownians for generations to come. Yes, he was literally just a cow. So, from headless chickens to still not entirely understood alien space goo, there's plenty of real-life cryptids to go around. I enjoyed researching for this video, and since I find cryptids incredibly interesting, I was very happy to see that there are several who have actually been found as real. I'd love to make a part 2 and cover some more creatures that I couldn't fit on this list, so let me know if that's something you guys would be interested in. I have a lot of fun content coming up, so if you're into anything and everything creepy, you'll want to stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Interesting how such a media frenzy can arise from perhaps something so simple. But what do you think? Raccoon?